Most of the honey on American grocery shelves is not honey. The pollen has been removed, specifically so you cannot trace where it came from. Some of it contains antibiotics banned in the United States. Stay until the end. We will show you exactly how to test what is in your jar right now. A single drop of real honey carries a microscopic signature, a pollen fingerprint that reveals not just which flowers the bees visited, but where in the world the honey was made. This is not a marketing slogan. It is the foundation of how scientists and regulators tell genuine honey from a bottle of syrup dressed up to look the part. When honey is tested in the lab, the process starts with a simple but precise workflow. 1 gram of honey is mixed with distilled water, spun in a centrifuge, and treated with chemicals to wash away the sugars. What remains is a pellet of pollen grains, tiny, rugged, and nearly impossible to destroy through normal processing. Each pollen grain is unique to its plant species. Under a microscope, a trained analyst can spot the difference between clover, orange blossom, eucalyptus, or the wildflowers of the American Midwest. These grains are compared against reference atlases, and the results are more than academic. If the pollen matches the floral source and region claimed on the label, the honey passes the first test of authenticity. If the pollen is missing, or if the sample contains grains from plants that do not grow anywhere near the supposed origin, it is a red flag for fraud or heavy processing. The science is rigorous. Standard protocols call for counting at least 200 pollen grains per sample to reach a 95% confidence level about the honey's origin. Some labs go further, counting up to 500 grains to pin down minor floral components. The process uses high-powered light microscopes, 400 to 1,000 times magnification, and digital imaging software to cut down on human error. When protocols are followed, experienced pollinologists can identify country-level origin in about 80% of single-flower honeys. For blends, the pollen mix still tells the story. If a jar labeled wildflower contains only a handful of pollen grains, or the grains come from plants found only in Asia or South America, something does not add up. This is not just a matter of curiosity. Pollen is the only natural marker that survives most processing steps and cannot be faked or dissolved. Its presence proves that honey has not been stripped and reconstituted, that it has not been pushed through membranes designed to erase its history. When pollen is missing, there is no way to verify the floral or geographic source, and no way to catch honey that has been imported, adulterated, or contaminated. That is why pollen analysis, millisapollinology, is the gold standard for honey authenticity. Without it, traceability is lost, and so is any real assurance about what is in the jar. Industrial honey processors don't just stumble into removing pollen, they engineer it out with precision. Ultrafiltration systems dominate the modern packing line, using synthetic or ceramic membranes with pores as small as 1 to 5 microns. For context, most pollen grains measure over 10 microns across, meaning these filters catch and hold back nearly every grain. The honey that comes out the other side is stripped of its natural fingerprint, leaving behind a liquid that is visually perfect, but scientifically anonymous. The machinery itself is built for this job. Polyether sulfone or ceramic membranes run under steady pressure and mild heat, sometimes after a pre-centrifugation step to thin out the honey. The result is that more than 99% of pollen is removed, along with wax and other visible particles. But the sugars and any dissolved contaminants like antibiotics or pesticides pass straight through. The clarity is impressive, but so is the erasure of origin. This process isn't just about aesthetics. The timing lines up with a key policy change. In 2001, the USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, APHIS, began requiring that honey from China be accompanied by a pollen analysis certificate. The intent was to make it harder to sneak in honey from restricted sources. Instead, the industry doubled down on filtration. By removing pollen before export, producers could ship bulk honey that was impossible to trace, relabel it in a third country, and land it on American shelves with a new identity. The APHIS rule meant to protect consumers, ended up driving the very practice it was supposed to stop. Ultrafiltration doesn't make honey safer. The membrane pores are too large to block most chemical residues. Chloramphenicol and other banned antibiotics, molecules less than half a micron wide, slip through untouched. So while the filtration process creates a product that looks pure, it can still carry risks hidden from view. And because the FDA does not require pollen to be present in honey sold in the US, these jars can legally bear the honey label even when their true source and safety are unverifiable. For American shoppers, the practical effect is clear. When pollen is gone, there is no way to confirm what's really in the jar or where it came from. The machinery is designed to erase the evidence. In an industry where traceability is the only defense against fraud and contamination, ultrafiltration turns honey into a blank slate, one that looks wholesome but may be hiding more than just its floral origins. Chloramphenicol isn't just a technicality buried in regulatory paperwork. It is a real health risk that is turned up in honey jars on American shelves. This antibiotic, once used in livestock and bee colonies overseas, is banned for use in food animals in the United States because it can trigger a rare but potentially fatal condition called aplastic anemia. In simple terms, this is a disorder where the body's bone marrow stops making enough new blood cells, leaving people vulnerable to infections and uncontrolled bleeding. Even tiny traces, measured in parts per billion, are enough to raise alarms. When honey is shipped in bulk from countries with less oversight, residues of chloramphenicol sometimes ride along for the journey. Ultrafiltration, the industry's preferred tool for removing pollen and erasing origin, does nothing to stop these chemicals. The molecules are far smaller than pollen grains and pass right through the synthetic membranes used in modern honey processing. So a jar can look crystal clear, test negative for pollen, and still carry a banned drug that's invisible to the eye and undetectable by taste or smell. The FDA has set the official tolerance for chloramphenicol in honey at 0. Any detectable amount is considered a violation, and shipments that test positive are supposed to be refused at the border. But with only about 5% of imported honey actually tested, most contaminated batches escape notice. Public warnings from U.S. senators and food safety advocates have pointed to this gap, stressing that American consumers are left with the burden of trust. For anyone buying honey for its supposed health benefits, the risk is clear. Without traceable pollen, there is no way to know if a jar is pure or if it carries a chemical that could do real harm. At the border, the numbers tell a troubling story. The Food and Drug Administration, FDA, physically inspects or samples only about 5% of all honey shipments entering the United States. That means for every 100 shipments, 95 pass through customs with no lab test, just a paperwork check. This limited screening is not a secret. It is confirmed by FDA import data and has been flagged by food safety investigations for over a decade. The agency relies on a risk-based targeting system, focusing on shipments from countries or suppliers with a history of violations. But honey is cheap, high volume, and easy to blend or relabel, making it a low priority compared to higher-risk foods. This inspection gap leaves the door wide open for ultra-filtered pollen-free imports and for honey contaminated with banned antibiotics like chloramphenicol. Even though the FDA sets a zero-tolerance policy for that drug, the odds of any given jar being tested are slim. Most contaminated or adulterated honey never gets flagged, and once it clears customs, it is mixed into the retail supply chain, bottled under familiar store brands, and sold as if it were pure and traceable. The consequences are direct for American shoppers. With such a small slice of imports tested, there is no reliable barrier stopping fraudulent or unsafe honey from reaching grocery shelves. The health risks, ranging from hidden antibiotics to mislabeled origins, are not just theoretical. They are a function of a system where the vast majority of honey is trusted on paper, not proven by science. For anyone buying honey for its supposed health benefits, that 5% inspection rate is a warning, not a reassurance. Great Value, Walmart's store brand, shows just how far from real honey a product can get while still making it onto American shelves. Independent lab results from 2023 found HMF levels, an indicator of heat exposure, over 30 milligrams per kilogram, double what is typical for raw honey. Texas A&M's pollen lab reported zero detectable pollen across multiple great value batches, meaning there is no way to confirm the floral source or country of origin. These findings echo food safety news investigations and support FDA warning letters issued in previous years. The so-called organic line has not fared better. Chemical markers for syrup adulteration, including suspicious sugar ratios, have turned up in third-party tests, raising questions about both authenticity and safety. Trader Joe's Manuka honey is marketed as a premium product, but pollen analysis tells a different story. Samples sent to a California lab in 2022 contained only 57 to 63% Manuka pollen. The New Zealand government requires at least 80% for a product to be labeled as genuine Manuka honey. A class action lawsuit filed in 2023 alleges mislabeling, arguing that lower pollen percentages mean the honey is either heavily blended or not true Manuka at all. While Trader Joe's has disputed some of these claims, the lab data is public record. Good & Gather, Target's private label, was named directly in a 2021 Florida lawsuit over fake honey. Multiple batches tested by the Florida Department of Agriculture contain no detectable pollen. This is a textbook sign of ultrafiltered processing, a process that strips out the natural markers regulators and scientists use to verify origin. The lawsuit was settled in 2022, but the lab findings remain part of the public docket. For consumers, this means the honey in the bottle is scientifically anonymous. There is no way to trace it back to a specific region or floral source, and no proof it is free from contaminants. Nice Walgreens house brand failed every pollen test conducted by Texas A&M's Melissa Pollinology Lab in 2020 and 2021. Every sample submitted, regardless of floral claim, came back with 0 pollen grains. This result violates the Texas standard for retail honey, which requires a minimum pollen count to qualify as genuine. Consumer reports have flagged Nice honey for the same reason. It is ultra-filtered with no traceability and no way to confirm purity or safety. Berry Hill, sold at Aldi, has faced similar allegations. Class action filings in 2022 allege that Berry Hill honey is ultra-filtered to hide the use of cheap Asian imports, specifically from China and Vietnam. Lab analysis cited in the suit found no pollen in random samples, and sugar profiles were inconsistent with unadulterated honey. While the case is ongoing, the evidence points to a product that has been processed to erase its botanical fingerprint, leaving shoppers with a bottle of clear syrup that cannot be verified as honey in any scientific sense. Publix's store brand, including its orange blossom and clover honeys, has been the subject of state-level fraud suits in Florida and Georgia. In 2022, the Florida Department of Agriculture tested several Publix honey samples and found no pollen present. The lack of pollen means the honey fails to meet the Florida statutory definition for retail honey. A pending lawsuit alleges that the product is misrepresented on the label, with consumers paying for a health food but receiving something closer to processed syrup. Signature Select, the Safeway and Albertsons store brand, claims raw, unfiltered on the label. But lab testing from 2023 showed 0 pollen in multiple batches. The Federal Trade Commission opened an inquiry after consumer complaints, and while no public enforcement action has been taken yet, the contradiction between the label and the lab results is clear. Without pollen, there is no way to confirm the honey's origin or purity. For consumers, the promise of raw, unfiltered is not backed by any verifiable evidence. Kroger's private label rounds out this first block of brands. Independent lab analysis in 2024 found elevated HMF levels, a sign that the honey had been exposed to excessive heat during processing. While the product passed basic sugar profile tests, the lack of pollen and the chemical markers for overheating suggest a product that has been stripped of its natural health benefits. Shoppers buying Kroger honey for its supposed antimicrobial or antioxidant properties are, in effect, buying the equivalent of decaf coffee for an energy boost. The active ingredients are gone. Each of these 8 brands illustrates a broader pattern. Ultrafiltration and heavy processing erase the natural markers that make honey traceable, authentic, and beneficial. Lab sheets, lawsuits, and agency reports all point to the same conclusion. When pollen is missing, the health benefits are lost, the origin is untraceable, and the risk of hidden contaminants remains. For American consumers, the evidence is clear. Most mass-market honey jars are not what they claim to be. Sous B, once the standard bearer for American honey, now faces mounting scrutiny. Independent lab results from 2023, cited in a class action lawsuit, found zero pollen in Sous B samples. The suit alleges that the cooperative sourced ultra-filtered imports from Asia, then bottled and sold them as U.S.-made honey. Sous B disputes the claims, but the company has not released third-party pollen counts or isotope test results to the public. The absence of pollen means there is no way to verify the floral source, region, or purity, leaving consumers with a jar that could just as easily contain relabeled syrup as real honey. For shoppers looking for a trustworthy, traceable product, that is a major red flag. Nature-Nate's, a brand that markets itself as raw and unfiltered, has also drawn criticism from consumer advocates. A 2022 report flagged elevated HMF levels, evidence of heat exposure that can destroy enzymes and antioxidants. Some independent researchers have raised concerns about possible dilution, noting that the sugar profile in select lots did not match the expected ratio for pure clover or wildflower honey. Nature-Nate's has published internal lab results showing compliance with basic U.S. standards, but has not released detailed third-party pollen or isotope reports. For consumers buying Nature-Nate's for its supposed health benefits, the lab findings suggest that much of the bioactive value may be gone by the time the jar hits the shelf. Smucker's honey packets, a staple in food service and fast food, offer little reassurance for anyone seeking real honey. Every batch tested by the Texas A&M Pollen Lab in 2021 and 2022 came back with zero pollen grains. The packets are sold as honey but are often labeled honey sauce, a legal gray area that allows for the addition of corn syrup or other sweeteners. No public record exists of Smucker's providing full lab transparency, and the lack of pollen means there is no way to confirm what is inside. For institutional buyers and consumers alike, this is a product that delivers sweetness, but not authenticity. Members Mark, Sam's Club's private label, follows the same pattern. Food Safety News reported that 77% of big box store honey samples, including Members Mark, were pollen-free in 2023. The product is often imported in bulk, ultra-filtered, and bottled domestically, making it impossible to trace the true source. Isotope tests have revealed sugar ratios consistent with syrup adulteration in some batches, though Members Mark has not faced public enforcement action. The bottom line for shoppers: a low price, but no proof of purity or origin. H-E-B, a major Texas grocery chain, markets its private label honey as local and pure. Yet a 2023 state inspection found near zero pollen in multiple H-E-B honey jars. Texas regulations permit the sale of filtered honey, so the product remains on shelves despite failing the pollen test used in other states. No lawsuits or FDA warnings have been issued, but the scientific evidence points to a product that is more processed than advertised. For Texans seeking genuine local honey, the lack of pollen should give pause. CVS and Rite Aid Pharmacy honey rounds out this block. The Texas A&M lab found no pollen in any of the tested batches, and a 2022 consumer report flagged some samples for detectable chloramphenicol, an antibiotic banned in food products. The presence of this residue, even in trace amounts, is a serious concern. The FDA's own import alerts confirm that some pharmacy brand honey has been refused entry due to antibiotic contamination. For consumers buying honey at the drugstore for its supposed health benefits, these findings are a warning. The product may not only lack authenticity, but could also carry risks that are invisible on the label. Across these brands, the same pattern repeats. Ultrafiltration erases pollen, making true origin and purity impossible to verify. Isotope tests and chemical assays reveal inconsistencies, sometimes pointing to syrup adulteration, sometimes to residues of banned antibiotics. Lawsuits and consumer reports document the gap between marketing claims and scientific reality. The FDA's labeling standards, which do not require pollen to be present, allow these products to be sold as honey, regardless of their actual composition. For American shoppers, the consequences are clear. Without pollen, there is no way to confirm if the honey is authentic, traceable, or free from harmful contaminants. Buying ultra-filtered honey for health benefits is like buying decaf coffee for the energy boost. The active ingredients are missing. The evidence from lab tests, lawsuits, and import alerts points to a retail market where most jars are scientifically anonymous and potentially unsafe. In the absence of transparent third-party testing, consumers are left to trust a label that may not mean what it claims. Heat and filtration do not just erase pollen, they take a toll on the very enzymes that set real honey apart from sugar syrup. Diastase, a natural enzyme found in fresh honey, plays a key role in breaking down starches and is often used by labs as a marker of honey's freshness and biological value. The European Union sets a minimum diastase activity of 8 diastase units, DU, for retail honey. Anything below that signals the honey has been overheated, stored too long, or diluted with syrup. Many mass-market brands tested in the US fall short of this threshold, with some samples registering less than 4 DU, barely half the recommended minimum. Another measurable casualty of heavy processing is hydroxymethylfurfuryl, HMF. HMF forms when honey is heated beyond what bees or nature would ever do. Authentic, minimally processed honey typically contains less than 15 milligrams of HMF per kilogram. But lab reports from store brands often show HMF levels at double or triple that amount. High HMF is a chemical scar left by industrial heat, and it signals that the honey's enzymes and antioxidants have been broken down. For anyone buying honey for its supposed health benefits, these numbers matter. When diastase drops and HMF climbs, the bottle on the shelf is closer to flavored syrup than to the nutrient-rich food most people expect. A jar of real honey is more than just sugar. It's a blend of aromas, flavors, and nutrients that come from the flowers bees visit. But when processors strip out pollen through ultrafiltration, they are not just erasing a forensic marker for scientists. They are removing the very compounds that make honey distinct. Volatile aroma compounds, responsible for the floral, fruity, or herbal notes in authentic honey, are tied to pollen and wax particles. With those gone, what is left is bland and one-dimensional, lacking the scent and complexity that should greet you when you open the lid. The loss does not stop at aroma. Many of the micronutrients and antioxidants that people expect from honey, trace minerals, phenolic acids, and enzymes are bound up with pollen and are sensitive to heat and filtration. Once removed, the nutritional value drops, and the health claims on the label become little more than marketing. For shoppers paying premium prices for raw or unfiltered honey, the reality is often closer to a bottle of processed syrup. It is like reaching for decaf coffee when you need a caffeine kick. The label promises benefits that simply are not there. Without pollen, there is no way to trace the honey's origin or verify its quality. The result is a product that looks the part but has lost its identity, both legally and on the palate. YS Eco Bee Farms relies on raw, unpasteurized honey, never microfiltered, with every batch independently tested. A 2025 Spruce Eats review confirms visible pollen under the microscope and HMF levels between 4 and 8 milligrams per kilogram, well within safe limits. The true source. Certified Seal traces each jar from hive to shelf, and USDA organic status guarantees no synthetic pesticides or antibiotics. The result is a thick, creamy honey that naturally crystallizes and retains its nutrients. Be Well Honey from South Carolina offers unfiltered, raw honey sourced from U.S. floral regions. Independent analysis cited by Tasting Table's 2022 ranking shows preserved pollen and HMF values below 10 milligrams per kilogram. USDA, organic and non-GMO project certifications back their claims, and recent batches pass antibiotic residue tests with USDA certificates available. The honey's flavor and health benefits remain intact. Local hive honey partners with domestic beekeepers bottling 23 regional varieties raw. Each jar is True Source certified with moderate pollen counts and HMF between 6 and 10 milligrams per kilogram, confirmed by independent labs. Certificates of analysis show no detectable antibiotic residues and trace every jar to a U.S. apiary. Lineage Provision screens for more than 390 contaminants, including glyphosate and antibiotics. Their honey is USDA organic, True Source certified, and third-party labs confirm a full pollen spectrum and HMF between 3 and 7 milligrams per kilogram. Each batch comes with a certificate of analysis confirming negative results for chloramphenicol and other residues. Wetherspoon Manuka sources directly from New Zealand, never blending with imports. Batch-level testing meets or exceeds the 80% Manuka pollen threshold, with HMF values between 2 and 6 milligrams per kilogram. Each jar is antibiotic-free, supported by third-party analysis, and carries UMF certification for genuine Manuka honey. A honey jar's label can be a maze of claims, but only a few seals truly matter. The True Source certified seal stands apart. This isn't just a logo. It represents a rigorous audit that tracks honey from the beekeeper's hives to the bottling line. Every shipment is followed through a documented chain of custody, with independent auditors confirming that the honey hasn't been relabeled, blended, or swapped for imports. Companies like Local Hive and Lineage Provisions go further, publishing batch-level certificates that detail pollen analysis and contaminant screenings, offering proof that what's in the jar matches what's on the label. USDA Organic is another familiar seal, promising that no synthetic pesticides or antibiotics were used, and that hives meet certain management standards. Yet, organic certification doesn't guarantee the honey is unfiltered, or that pollen remains. Many organic honeys are imported and may be processed to the point where their origin is obscured. The seal carries more weight when paired with supply chain transparency, such as True Source certification or independent lab results. Non-GMO Project Verified indicates bees weren't fed genetically modified sugar syrup, and it reduces the chance of corn-based sweeteners, but it doesn't address filtration or traceability. Phrases like 100% pure, all natural, or no added sugar have no legal definition and aren't enforced by the FDA. These terms can appear on ultra-filtered, pollen-free honey with no consequences, serving as marketing rather than a guarantee of authenticity or quality. The strongest assurance comes from seals backed by documented audits and transparent sourcing. True Source Certified sets the standard for traceability. USDA. Organic adds value when supported by independent verification. Generic claims, no matter how wholesome they sound, offer little real protection. A honey jar doesn't come with a lab report, but a few simple checks at home can help you spot trouble before you buy or after you open the lid. Start with the water test. Drop a spoonful of honey into a glass of room temperature water. Real honey sinks in a single, tight blob. If it dissolves or spreads out quickly, that is a sign of added syrup or heavy dilution. Next, try the spoon test. Dip in a spoon and lift it slowly. Authentic honey forms a long, steady thread before it breaks. If it drips off right away, you are likely looking at a product that has been thinned or blended. The fridge test is another quick check. Place the jar in the refrigerator for 6 hours. Genuine honey thickens and starts to crystallize at the bottom. Ultra-filtered or adulterated honey stays clear and runny, no matter how cold it gets. For the paper towel test, put a few drops on a plain paper towel. True honey barely soaks in, while diluted honey spreads quickly and leaves a watery ring. No single test is foolproof, but failing 2 or more suggests the jar is missing the natural markers of real honey. Price is a powerful clue too. Authentic raw honey from U.S. beekeepers usually costs $8 to $15 per pound. Anything under $5 a pound, especially in a plastic bear bottle, is almost always ultra-filtered import. Real honey is never perfectly clear. It should look a bit cloudy from pollen and wax, and over time, it will crystallize. If your honey stays liquid and see-through for months, that is a red flag. Bottom line, if you want to know what is really in your jar, run these tests and check the price. If your honey fails the checks, it is time to switch brands. Hit subscribe for more investigations and comment below. Which brand are you testing and what did you discover? Right now, most honey on American shelves remains impossible to trace and easy to fake because the FDA still does not require pollen, origin, or purity on the label. Buying ultra-filtered honey for health is like buying decaf for the caffeine. Until real standards close that loophole, shoppers pay premium prices but gamble on authenticity and safety. The jar in your pantry is only as trustworthy as the system behind it. Drop your thoughts below. Your experience matters.